Hey guys, and welcome to Quality Shot. I'm extremely excited to be joined by cricket analyst, expert, and writer, is how I like to say, Jarrod Kimber. Of course, you may recognise him because he's, well, in my eyes, pretty much everyone, anything to do with cricket, podcasts, ESPN Cricket Info, and of course now recently as well, coming to YouTube and taking it by storm. Jarrod, how you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. No problem at all. So we're going to talk about something relatively specific for the viewers today. So mainly focusing on Jimmy Anderson. A couple of pieces that Jarrod has done. Please do check them out. They're articles and also I think video version as well on YouTube. So please do check those out for reference. And some of the stats and graphs etc. are exceptional. So definitely worth checking those out. But I wanted to get your view as well, Jarrod, on it, and I guess talk through it a little bit. So, I mean, Jimmy Anderson has been revered as someone who is potentially one of the best, fast bowlers of all time in terms of volume of wickets. But when you delve into it, and obviously looking at your pieces, especially in the last few years, his second innings performances haven't quite reflected some other bowlers, such as your Dale Steyns recently as well, on top of quite a plethora of other fast bowlers. In your article, you outlined that it's probably a mixture of volume of actually overs. He's actually, even though when he's part of a 5-man bowling attack, he's still bowling a lot more overs than another seamer who would be in a 4-man bowling attack because of England's reliance on himself and also Broad as well. I think they've bowled the most number of overs in the past few years of any seamer. So that's quite a damning stat, I guess, in terms of workload. But you did also mention that in terms of the I guess tech side of things and also the sports science, he does have that to his disposal. I actually just wanted to first ask you, how did this come about? Like, how did you actually think about putting this together, this piece?
I think Jimmy Anderson is probably one of the most fascinating cricketers because we have so much data on him. We've never had a fast bowler bowl this much before. Yeah. And, it's only recently that we've started to get more and more records when it comes to first-class cricket. But before that, if someone bowled as much as Jimmy Anderson, the majority of it was probably going to be in first-class cricket. So suddenly we have someone who is able to do that and who has bowled this much. He's probably the first truly professional, high-end sports science bowler we've ever had. So Glenn McGrath went through the academy, and a lot of Australian bowlers have gone through the academy. But England took their sports science to another level, which India are now getting to as well, which Australia never have. And so almost everyone before Jimmy Anderson was amateur, or they were what you would call semi-professional. So, the great stat is that at one stage, only a couple of years ago, Jimmy Anderson and Darren Gough had played the same amount of cricket, but one of them had played the majority in first class and one of them had played the majority in Test cricket. And that's because Darren Gough was a Yorkshire employee, right? He wasn't an England employee. Jimmy Anderson is an England employee. He's gone through the best sort of analysis and sports science that we've probably, that we've ever seen in cricket. So he's fascinating from that perspective. And also he's probably one of the last outswing bowlers we've had in Test cricket. So outswing bowling doesn't really exist anymore. Like, there are bowlers who can bowl an outswinger, but, for anyone who's over the age of 30, if you think of people like Damien Fleming and Matthew Hoggard and Sri Lanka had like a bunch of them, New Zealand as well. Always, everyone was taught that was the most important skill. And so Jimmy Anderson comes from that era, but he's completely a modern bowler. So much so that now he's a wobble ball bowler. And the outswinger is really not even his bread and butter anymore. He came into Test cricket bowling 6 outswingers in a row. And I don't know, the last time he bowled 6 outswingers in a row is probably setting someone up for to fail. And so there's a lot of information about him. And so when you look at, we can compare him to the handful of other bowlers who bowled late into their career. We can compare him to Dale Steyn. We can tell the story of how modern bowling's got a lot easier Since 2018, seam bowlers are completely on top. You can tell the Wobble ball story through Jimmy Anderson. He's probably the second major international player to really work out the Wobble ball, watching Muhammad Asif in the nets and basically stealing the delivery off him or borrowing, maybe is the best way of putting it. And without Jimmy Anderson, the Wobble ball probably wouldn't be as popular as it is today, because Muhammad Asif obviously, left the game shortly after that. I think that might have even been the year that he left the game. And it was Anderson, and the fact that Sky have better cameras and do more coverage that allowed other bowlers. Like, I've talked to bowlers who just looked it up on YouTube. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. And so, he's almost the first, incredible professional English cricketer. And I do mean English, not professional county cricketer, because there were plenty of those. There's sports science. There's the incredible amount of deliveries that he's bowled. The fact that he started as a white ball bowler, not being very good as a red ball bowler. There's a lot of story with Jimmy Anderson, and partly because he's just old, but partly because he has changed his career in so many. And he basically, you could make a strong argument that he started his career in probably the worst time to be a fast bowler in the world, in the history of the game, maybe. And he might end it at the best time to be a fast bowler. So there's a lot there. Not to mention the fact that also he's the only tail ender I've ever seen who believes the reverse sweep is his best shot. Like, there's a lot to unpack with someone like Jimmy Anderson.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to quickly ask you about one of your points you made, where you said from 2018 onwards, it's now becoming since that period, it's become a lot easier for faster bowlers. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think we're probably now through the combination of white ball cricket. Red ball bowlers are a lot more accurate than they used to be. If you look back, we used to have a lot of 90-mile-an-hour bowlers who bowled everywhere. Guys like Nancy Haywood and Sean Tate and these sorts of guys who came through the system and they bowled fast. Billy Stanlake is exactly the similar kind of bowler than them, and he's taller. Right. I mean, I don't think we've ever had a bowler as tall as Billy Stanlake, as fast as Billy Stanlake. Right. And he doesn't play Test cricket. And the reason he doesn't play Test cricket is, I've talked to first-class cricketers about this. They just wait for him now. And that's because they're more used to facing faster bowlers. Right. If Billy Stanlake ever managed to hit a line and a length consistently, he'll probably take 100 wickets quicker than anyone ever has in Test cricket. Because I don't know how you face someone who's 6'11" who bowls 90 miles an hour. Yeah. He's considerably quicker than Morne Morkel and considerably taller than Morne Morkel. And Morne Morkel was the most difficult player to face at his best. So we have changed what we need to be. And Steve Harmison told me once that he thinks it's because in white ball cricket, you can't be inaccurate anymore. You have to be accurate. So I think that's a big part of it. If you look at Pat Cummins, we've never had a bowler as fast as Pat Cummins, as accurate as Pat Cummins.
That's true,
right?
Yeah.
So we've had faster bowlers than him, and we've certainly had more accurate bowlers than him. But if you look at guys like, I think the best ones to look at are probably guys like Malcolm Marshall, Dale Steyn, Alan Donald. We just had a series. We just had entire test matches where Pat Cummins didn't bowl a short and wide ball, right? Dale Steyn did. Alan Donald certainly did. And part of the reason was that those guys were swing bowlers, and you can't always control the ball when it's swinging. Pat Cummins is coming wide on the crease. He's angling every ball in at your stumps. And he's bowling with, more often than not, a wobble ball seam. Some balls are going to hit leg stump. Some balls are going to miss your outside edge at 90, 92, 93, 94 miles an hour, right? We've never had this before. So there's the first thing. I think that is huge. I think also analysis. If you look at someone like Kemar Roach and Stuart Broad, their careers have probably been changed, maybe even saved in Broad's case, by the fact that they started bowling around the wicket more to left-handers, So I think we've gone from bowling 10% of our deliveries around the wicket to left-handers to 40% of our deliveries around the wicket to left-handers in a very short period of time. This started beforehand. You only bowled to someone around the wicket if they were already on 180 and you'd run out of options, or if it was someone that you knew had a weakness against a particular bowler around the wicket. There were very few bowlers like Andre Nell who existed who liked bowling around the wicket. So the analysis is certainly played a part. The other one is the wobble ball. It has to be a part because it's really, if you think about it, there's not a lot a batter can do. If you don't know, so what batters are doing is, you can't follow the ball at 90 miles an hour, right? So basically anything over 80 miles an hour, your eyes can't track it. Can't move quick enough. Your head can't move quick enough. Your eyes can't move quick enough. So what international batters do is they have this thing called a saccade, right? Where they watch it come out of the hand for about the first 2 or 3 meters, and then they look to where they think it's going to go, right? Which means in those first 2 or 3 meters, and also the bowler's wrist position as the ball is coming over, they're trying to get all the information about what the ball is about to do. Okay, he's holding it for an outswinger. So this one's going to be an outswinger. Oh, it's come out of his hand. It started to swing. Oh, it's actually, the seam's going the other way. This is going to slant in. Oh, he's run his fingers over it, right? Those are all the things that the very top level batters manage to do. If you have a ball where it doesn't matter where any of those things, guys coming in like this, he's going to do this behind the ball. And when it comes down, he doesn't know whether it's going to go that way or that way, right? What do? There's no sign, right? There's no signal. It's not, you don't get the thing where, it's swinging a little bit, so you get no hint. It's literally going to hit the pitch, and it's going to go one of 2 ways or straight ahead, right? So you basically got 3 options every ball. I think that is a huge, huge advantage to bowlers. It'd be really interesting to see if it continues. I think there are probably some other things as well. I think the pitches are probably slightly better for bowling. I think after, the 2000s, from 2005 to 2015, CEOs completely took over and went, we want 5-day matches. And then I think there's an understanding afterwards that those 5-day matches were dull as shit and no one cared, right? So I think there was certainly that. There was a few pitches that were penalised for being too good for batting, which may have also played a part. I would like to think that this is a better era for fast bowling as well. But there are real signs that that's not the case, which is the fact that Ishant Sharma and Suranga Lakmal were absolutely 2 of the worst bowlers in the history of the game for a great percentage of their career. And now they've both become incredible over the last 3 or 4 years, right? That can't just be, I'm not saying they couldn't mature and they haven't improved on their own, but it does feel like if you took a bowler who, I don't know, played between 2013 and 2016 and was in their mid-20s and they failed, you brought them back now and they're still fully fit and they've continued to work on their game. My guess is their bowling average is going to be a lot lower now than it was back then, just because things have changed. Analysis helps at this stage. The way that we set up analysis in cricket, it helps bowlers more than batters, right? That won't always be the case, but at the moment, it helps bowlers more than batters. And so we know exactly where to put a ball for each particular batter now, from what side of the wicket. We're learning more and more about that. So I think when it comes to bowling at 90 miles an hour, any slight advantage is probably going to weigh that in your favor. And the red ball moves. The white ball doesn't move. So we haven't seen it in white ball cricket because white balls don't do anything for you.
Yeah. That's so interesting, actually, that you said about, because I feel like the general consensus from quite a few fans anyway is that the game was definitely heading towards it being more of a batsman-centric, batsman-friendly game. But you make a good point about the analysis, which is now there's so much footage, etc. You know exactly where to land the ball, and the wobble seam has made it a lot harder as well.
Yeah, the whole batting-centric thing, I think realistically, the 2000s were the first time that, in Test cricket anyway, batting was more dominant than bowling. Yeah. Up before, I think 1940s and 1950s might have been the last time that you could argue, you would say that batting was more dominant than bowling. So even though we talk about it being a batting game and all this, the bowlers have actually done pretty well. And then in the 2000s, a lot of things went wrong for bowlers. DRS is another one that has probably helped bowlers. And it's not so much DRS, the system. It's umpires being able to tell, lots of balls hit the stumps. They're not all slipping down the leg side. And also, it's helped fast bowlers bowl fuller, because before they would bowl a little bit back of the length, right? And now you realize there's no point bowling back of length. You'll never get an LBW ever again. You're much better off trying to make sure every ball hits the stump. So, and the best example really of how much there's been a divergence between white ball cricket and red ball cricket and batting and bowling is that for the first time ever, the one-day batting averages are higher than Test batting averages, right? So we now come to an era where legitimately it's definitely a batting-dominated game in one-day cricket. T20 cricket is probably moving towards that as well. But in red ball cricket at the moment, it's a bowling dominated game, and mostly fast bowling.
With the wobble team, because you obviously mentioned, and I'm a Pakistan fan, so Muhammad Asif was like a revelation when he came out. Obviously, all the other controversy with it. But in terms of the wobble seam, that was, as you said,
when he wasn't taking steroids and fixing matches. Or what? Didn't he go through an airport with heroin or something? Or
I don't know.
When he wasn't doing those things, what a bowler. No, he really was. He was a genius.
No, he was. Yeah, I mean, it's a massive shame. He's definitely a wasted talent. But one thing that he's left us, which you mentioned, is the wobble seam. But as a cricket fan, like when you saw that and the footage, was it I just wanted to get your view on it. When you first saw it, did you just think this is so weird? Like, what's he doing? Because he doesn't. There's so much. I guess he's gambling really because he puts on a spot, but there's such a specific line length to put that on to make sure you don't. For example, it might come into the batsman, but you could drift onto the pads. If it then seems it comes off the seam and then goes into the batsman. And do you think that the reason why now a lot of batsmen who play the ball late, like Kane Williamson, they are so good now in the Test cricket, and they're definitely. I think there's definitely more of a narrative around playing the ball as late as you can in Test cricket. Is that because the wobble seam is now so prominent?
No, I think that's probably also just to do with the fact that bowlers are quicker now than they've ever been before. And if you go back to the way the LBW decision used to be, if you got on the front foot, chances are you weren't going to go out LBW, right? So it makes sense in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s to plant yourself on the front foot. And obviously the way that the bowlers overcame that was bounces at that time. And so then batters get helmets. There's this constant sort of evolutionary struggle between those two things, isn't there? And I think playing late has always worked. I don't think that is, the more time you give yourself, there's two things it does. It gives you more time to play the ball, but it also means that the ball's directly under your eyes. If you're playing out in front of your body, that's not the case. I think that has probably played a part in that as well. But I think that techniques were already changing before that. So when I first saw the wobble ball seam, you got to remember that we didn't know what it was. So, and Muhammad Asif wasn't exactly going around telling everyone, right? Yeah. So it was mentioned a little bit. I think there was a South Africa series he might have played. I think it was South Africa or Sri Lanka, where clearly the term wobble ball was being used, right? And then obviously in England, there was a little bit more talk about it as well. But I think there was a bit of a feeling at that stage that it might be accidental, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, yeah.
And we didn't know. And even as recently as a couple of years ago, I still thought a lot of bowlers, it's really hard unless you're seeing a super slow mo to see if the bowler's just got their fingers wrong. Basically, the stupid thing about a wobble ball is it's literally what every person in club cricket does.
Yeah.
The difference is that they're controlling it so that it's more often than not going to hit the seam. Whereas in club cricket, sometimes you do it so poorly, it doesn't even hit the seam, right? And you're not doing it at 90 miles an hour. So I think it was really hard. But I do think if you look back at, 2005 through to 2014, I think a lot of seam bowlers were much better at having a dead straight seam, right? And I think that's a really, really clear thing that happens. Whereas before, if you look at some of the older footage, you can see that bowlers had trouble keeping a dead straight stream. So obviously, cricket coaching had got to a level that almost no matter what pace you bowled, they could get you to have the seam straight up. If that's the case, then probably more and more of what we saw there was probably almost an overlap where some bowlers were trying to keep the ball dead straight and it wasn't because they weren't perfect at it. And other guys were purposely not trying to keep the ball dead straight. So I think there was a bit of a confusion, and it probably wasn't until the fact that you had bowlers from all around the world doing it that it really became a thing. I think when Anderson did it and then other bowlers started following suit, I think that was about the point where we realized that there was a ball there. But because it is a confusing thing, it's not as easy. It's not like an off-cutter. Like if someone's bowling an off-cutter or a knuckleball, one slow motion will help you perfectly there. Do you know what I mean? Be able to go, oh, okay, yeah, all these fingers are on the side of the ball. Got it. Right? Oh, look at that. He's holding the ball like that. That must be a knuckleball. Or it doesn't rotate when it comes out the hand, or it does rotate, right? Mm. With the wobble ball seam, you almost have to see someone do it. So for a while, I thought Pat Cummins was doing it by accident. occasionally because he didn't do it all the time. And he went from seam up and then had them occasionally. And it was a conversation I had with Dan Bredick, where Dan Bredick was like, I don't think he's doing them by accident. Right. And that was the point. I think when I saw Cummins do it, I started looking at a lot of different footage of players. That's only really recent, right? Considering how old this ball now is. But it did move slowly. It moved slower than the Doosra did. Partly because there is a bit of a confusion with it. Like if you're bowling the Doosra, it is very obvious that your hand and your wrist and your elbow position are all doing something completely different. Yeah. If you're bowling the wobble ball seam, maybe it's a mistake, maybe it's right. And it wasn't to the point where I think the majority of bowlers were doing it consistently that you're like, well, this can't be a mistake. You know, Sam Curran used to have an incredible seam position and now he doesn't. That's not an accident.
It's so interesting as well because when you grow up in club cricket, they tell you make sure you've got your wrist behind the ball, straight seam, and now the game's completely changed in the last few years, and saying that actually, as long as it's more about your control rather than and knowing what's coming out of your hand in terms of wrist position, rather than making sure the seam is is upright and bolted up, which is just crazy because it's just evolved so much. But it definitely is, and I can see why you're saying now that from 2018 it's become more bowler friendly. From a fan perspective, from your personal view, are you happy that it's become now kind of it's wrestled back into the bowler's favour in terms of from a test match point of view? Because you said that obviously the five match test matches, a lot of them were not particularly exciting, whereas now you might see test matches, for example, we saw England India series ending in 3-4 days, and it's potentially a lot more condensed, but it's potentially also more exciting.
Look, I'm always on the side of wickets as a general rule in my life. Look, I think there's been a bit of a correction. I think the batters are just starting to get their head above water again after a really bad couple of years. They will work out ways to play this. They may not ever average 40 like they did in some years, which was remarkable. And that's including tail enders, I think. Well, maybe it was 37 or 38. It was really high. We may never get back to that, but that's probably right. I think we got down to 25 one year. That's probably too low because that means that, test matches aren't even making it to the fourth day that often. There's a really interesting thing going on in basketball, which is once the 3-point people worked out that 3 points were worth more than 2, which took basketball an incredibly long time to work out. Everyone started shooting 3-pointers. And what happened was that basically you either shot at the ring or you shoot outside. And what it means from a basketball perspective is, oh, great, a lot of dunks and a lot of 3-pointers. And you think, that's awesome. The same way you think, awesome, we've got a bunch of 90-mile-an-hour bowlers rolling people in 2 days. It becomes less special when it happens every time, though.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing that happened in basketball is that you start to realize, and baseball's had a similar thing with home runs. There's more home runs than ever before. That means there's more people striking out than ever before. Right? There's more wickets than ever before. That means there's less people making incredible innings because they're not out there, right? So there always has to be that balance. And I would say that, what are we, 2011? We haven't had as much test cricket over the last couple of years, obviously, with COVID. It does feel like there's been a slight movement back towards the batters. I don't think the batters need to average anything massive, but so I think if you look at the history of cricket, somewhere between an average of 30 and 32 is probably the most exciting cricket because it means that people are making big scores occasionally, and it means that the bowlers are consistently in the game. And that's kind of, I think the 90s were a very good, forget the fact I'm from the 90s, and I've got a nostalgic view. If you look at it from a mathematical point of view and you look at the way that Test cricket really grew in the 90s, I think it's probably fair to say that was a very good era because there was a lot of good bowlers who did very well. The pitches were usually helpful to bowlers, but people still made runs. And I think that's kind of what you want. You can get a bit too one-dimensional if the bowlers dominate or the batters dominate. I think it's always safer to have the bowlers dominate because I think that's more fun. Once the batters start to dominate, it does get, scores of 500, 600, 700. It's okay in a test match. Sometimes in Asia where it happens in the first innings and then the second innings, everyone makes 8. But if that starts to happen in, Australia and England, those pitches don't deteriorate in the same way, and so you just have terrible test matches. And I think that's what happened there. New Zealand's a really interesting one at the moment. New Zealand's this incredible team, and they've done it on the back of the most boring batting pitches on earth. And so New Zealand's become this great team, but I wonder how many casual fans watch them just because they're like, oh, great, New Zealand's going to make 600 for 4, and they're going to take forever to do it as well.
Yeah, that's definitely, New Zealand, an interesting team, actually. A team, definitely not a team of individuals, that's for sure. In terms of, sorry, I've gone a bit left field with it, but the Anderson-Steyn comparison, because I wanted to get your view on that, because obviously you've done quite a bit of research and articles, etc., on it. So I wanted to kind of get your breakdown of it. But in terms of when they were playing at the same time and going head to head, in terms of second innings averages, I mean, Anderson's was quite poor. I think it was an average of 100.
That's only the last couple of years, though. That's not comparing him to Steyn. So Steyn was on his skateboard by that point.
Yeah. And I think it was, you said, but back in 2018, which I think Steyn was pretty much almost done. In terms, I don't even know if he was playing at that point. Was definitely towards the tail end. That was an average of 48. But you made a good point that in terms of the balls that they're mainly using, obviously Anderson's using the Dukes and Steyn the Kookaburra for the most part, and Steyn in the back end being able to use the older ball was a lot more proficient in using it. But what's your kind of view on comparing the two in terms of, if you look at it, as you said, like there's no point comparing the last couple of years or Steyn from the start of his, but when they were both playing and both at their peak, what kind of, I guess, differentiates the two?
Well, look, I think it's important to say when they're both at their peak, Dale Steyn was probably maybe in the top 5 fast bowlers we've ever had.
Yeah.
Right. It'd be really interesting to see where he ranks all time. But when you factor in that Dale Steyn's career overlapped with this incredible batting era, and he managed to average low 20s, is phenomenal. But there are so many different aspects to it all. So for one thing, for at least a chunk of Dale Steyn's career, South Africa purposely put out wickets that favoured bowlers. In a way that England never really did. England have wickets that favour bowlers, but they never went out of their way to do it. Whereas what they did in South Africa was they literally, especially in Faf's captaincy, they said, let's just make the wickets really spicy because we can probably handle the spicier wickets better than overseas players can, right? And the bowling average is, the bowling averages are very low for South African seam bowlers, partly because they were incredible at home in those conditions, which Anderson obviously had as well. The difference is that Steyn was pretty much great everywhere, except weirdly England, where perhaps the Duke ball didn't quite do what he wanted it to do. But he was basically great everywhere. Whereas Anderson doesn't. He has periods where he's great in Australia and periods where he's great in India, and periods where he's great in other countries. But he also has periods where he's not. So I think if you're looking for the best peak bowler, Dale Steyn has one of the lowest averages in the history of Test cricket and one of the hardest eras to bowl. Yeah. And Anderson did not have a great average in that period, right? So I think there's that. I think they are weirdly they are both shorter bowlers, which I think we are going more and more towards taller bowlers in cricket. I think the speed gun probably kept us away from tall bowlers for a while because it wasn't set up to pick up the taller bowlers. But I think you can see now with whether it be Jason Holder or anyone like that, if you're a taller bowler and you can hit and you have any skills at all, I mean, Kyle Jamieson's basically unplayable at 83 miles an hour. It doesn't matter that he doesn't bowl 90 miles an hour. So I think the big argument with them is it really depends on what you value as greatness at a certain point, right? So if you're looking at who you're going to pick between the two, I would say that Jimmy Anderson has never been a better bowler than Dale Steyn at his best. But if Jimmy Anderson has a 19-year career where he ends up averaging 24.5, and Dale Steyn had basically, whatever it was, a 10 or 11 or a 12-year career where he averages 21, who do you pick, right? You want the bowler who bowls the extra years, don't you? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you want the guy who was better. It's a really, really interesting thing. And the other thing was that Dale Steyn was pretty much good very early on in his career. Yeah. And Jimmy Anderson wasn't. Jimmy Anderson struggled for a long time. So if you take if you take the best 10-year periods from each of them, maybe Jimmy Anderson has a better 10-year period than Dale Steyn. But yeah, they are, they're different kinds of bowlers. Obviously, Jimmy was quick when he was young, but he was never as quick as Steyn was. They had, Steyn was a proper menace. You go back, especially that early part of his career, he had that sort of Malcolm Marshall ability to hit players a lot, which a lot of short fast bowlers do. It's easy to get out of the way of a tall fast bowler because the ball bounces up. But when it's skidding at you, you have trouble. Jimmy Anderson couldn't do that. So, I remember years ago, someone asking about, someone was very upset saying that, Vernon Philander and I think it was Ryan Harris had very similar records at a certain point in their career.
Yeah.
And they were very upset that I thought Ryan Harris was a better bowler. And I said, basically, it comes down to this. Ryan Harris can bounce you out and he can beat you with pace and he can beat you with skill. Vernon Philander can only beat you with skill, right? So in that, again, that is something that Steyn has a huge advantage over Jimmy Anderson with. The fact that he could really intimidate batters, the fact that he could beat them with raw pace and he could beat them with skills. And his skills weren't probably quite as fine-tuned. I mean, Anderson, Stuart Clark, Vernon Philander, Muhammad Asif, these guys, their skills are on a different level. Steyn never needed to be on that level because he had a pretty good outswinger. He was skillful enough at his pace and he could hit you. Right. And those sorts of things are probably make him a slightly better package than Jimmy Anderson. But where Jimmy Anderson is incredible is once you get over 32, you're not supposed to be good at fast bowling. Right. It's actually the data on bowlers when they get over the age of 32 in Test cricket is pretty good. And that's because the only ones who ever do it are absolutely, truly greats. You don't even get the option to play. If you're looking at if you're looking at batting averages for players over the age of 35 or fast bowling averages for people over the age of 32, you're looking at just guns, right? Because if you're a 31-year-old fast bowler and you're average, right? And you're just going to get dropped. You're not even going to make it beyond 32. So to think that Anderson then did what Steyn couldn't do and wouldn't even be able to do, which is have this secondary career. And the fact that he's been so good at it, partly that is conditions based, because what peak Steyn would have been like if he bowled in the last 4 years is one of the great hypotheticals of all time. I think, I'd love to see some of the bowlers who were absolute great bowlers but bowled in very good batting eras, like suddenly appear in the last 3 years and see what they would have done on these pitches. So I think with that, you have to say that Anderson is an absolutely incredible creature and what he's been able to do and go on. And, that puts him up there with Courtney Walsh, Glenn McGrath and Richard Hadley. I would say that he probably has Walsh covered now. I think McGrath probably still has Anderson covered. I just think, especially since a lot of his career overlapped with one of the good batting eras as well, and he still didn't get hit. I think we know he was the next level. And Richard Hadley is, maybe the most effective one-man bowling attack we've ever had. He's certainly seen bowling Mural. He's probably the only other guy that comes close. So Anderson's probably third out of the fourth there, and that's a great place to be. But again, that shows you the difference between him and Steyn when you look at, like, we're talking about Steyn potentially being a top 5 bowling, talent of all time, guys with over 200 Test wickets. Anderson will end up with the most seam bowling wickets of all time, but I don't think he's in that top 5 discussion when you factor it all in. Now, if he plays for another 3 years and he continues to average about 20, at what stage do you say, okay, at his peak, he was never better than Malcolm Marshall. At his peak, he was never better than Richard Hadley. At his peak, he was never better than Dennis Lillee. All those things might be true. It doesn't matter if he has a 22-year career, taking wickets and his bowling average keeps coming down. It just doesn't, does it?
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Wasim Akram's my favourite, so in my mind, he'll always be number 1. But I'm not going to discuss it with you because you might destroy me with stats, so I don't want that. But Hoggard versus Anderson, you mentioned it in your article because they were at the same age, same average, and like same time in their career. And obviously, why do you think England trusted Anderson to then carry on? And now he's had a phenomenal career. Hoggard, I mean, obviously it might not have worked out. probably wouldn't have happened how it did with Anderson, but you never know. Do you think there was a specific reason behind it? Like, did you, when you're doing your kind of compiling your stats and looking into it, did you find anything as to why England weren't as set on sticking with Hoggard?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things. So yeah, it is interesting that when they were early 30s, they had a similar average, and Hoggard was just dismissed. Right? They just it comes back to my 32-year-old thing, right? He was around that age, and they just went, he's got nothing to give us. I think that some of it has to be their physicality, right? So Anderson was clear at the age of 32 that Anderson did not have a very old 32-year-old body, right? So if you compare him to, Ryan Harris or Vernon Philander or Hoggard, those sorts of guys, you look at their bodies and you're like, this is probably not going to, they're not going to age out as well, as gracefully, right? So I think that's a factor. I think work ethic and improvement is a factor. I think Hoggard was absolutely brilliant, but Hoggard basically, from my perspective, and I've never talked to him about this, but from my perspective, I think he worked out how to bowl outswing brilliantly, and he's like, that's what I do, and I will continue to do that. Whereas what we know with Anderson is he started as an outswing bowler, he then developed the inswing. We now have the wobble ball. Obviously, he has variations within all those different things as well. He's a grumpy, angry guy, but he's also someone who is very, very dedicated to getting just that little bit better all the time. But I just think that the generations were changing as well. I think that Hoggard was dismissed as much as anything because that was kind of the last of the amateur era, amateur English sort of era, if you know what I mean. Like, that was the era where they just went, oh, he's had a good run, we'll get someone else in. Whereas now, I think we're if you look at Anderson, his path is really following Tom Brady and Serena Williams and Roger Federer, and what I thought AB de Villiers might do, although he's nicked off, but it might be Kyron Pollard who does it, or Chris Gale, right? Where I think now you're just like, well, we can't replace Jimmy Anderson, right? And I think that the other problem with Hoggard is that they probably went, well, we have a Jimmy Anderson. Do we need a Matthew Hoggard as well? But when you look at as good as Chris Wokes has been, no one thinks he's going to replace him, especially overseas.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think things have changed a little bit in the way that we think about players and age, because sports science allows us to stretch things out a little bit more. So that magical 32 number, I don't think, there are always going to be bowlers who are just gone. Your knee joints wear out and your ankles wear out and your back continues to break and your shoulder and all the things that fast bowlers have the strain on. We're not always going to be able to overcome it. But perhaps when we can overcome it, we'll have more chances to have people like Anderson. Like, I look at someone like Trent Boult. I don't know what age Trent Boult is, but he looks to me like a very light on his feet bowler who could continue to bowl unless he just can't do it at the pace he wants to do it. There's no reason why he shouldn't be able to bowl for quite some time. We also haven't got to the point where, baseballers have learned how to put pace on in their 30s, right? First time baseball pitchers have ever been able to do that is this era.
Yeah.
If we manage to do that with fast bowlers as well, we'll be able to keep them even longer. And I think so. A lot of things happen with Anderson where I think before it was like, he's had a good run. Who's next? Whereas I think what happened with Anderson is it was probably the first era, and this is bad and good, where with cricket, we're like, we have to milk every last wicket out of Jimmy Anderson that we physically can until he is no longer Jimmy Anderson. And then I think a lot of it was getting lucky. Let's say they flipped it, right? And they decided the Hoggard was their guy and Anderson wasn't. Well, we know what they would have missed out with Anderson if they flicked him at the age of 32. My guess is that Hoggard wouldn't have gone on to have a brilliant career and still be one of the world's best bowlers at the age of 39, right? He's let him. I'm not having a go at him. He's a professional athlete and he stopped playing. He's a larger lad than he was when he played.
Yeah, he's got his own meat business, I think.
He's got his own barbecue business, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And I think there's certainly an element of that kind of personality with Hoggard, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of different things went together. But I think the bigger argument I was trying to make is that we used to just dispose of really good players because they were of an age that we didn't really trust, right? And what we don't do now is that. What we do now is go, okay, how are we going to get the absolute most out of it? So you look at someone like Mitchell Starc. if Australia gets another couple of test bowlers coming through, my guess is they would say to Mitchell Starc, play IPL, play one-day cricket, and play T20 cricket. We don't need you as a test bowler anymore, but we want, I mean, Mitchell Starc is a Jasprit Bumrah level talent white ball bowler, and we just saw him go for 60 runs in a final in T20 cricket. Like, the man doesn't bowl enough in this format, and we know when he used to, he was unplayable, right?
Yeah.
If Australia really want to be a dominant team going into all these World Cups, having Mitchell Starc as an absolute white ball specialist would be ideal. So in the past, what would happen is you'd look at this and go, if he has a couple of bad years in Test cricket and occasionally gets smacked in a T20 game, they just phase him out. They don't need to do that anymore, right? We're thinking now. We're working these things out. And you can have conversations with the players as well and be honest. Like Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad wanted to play white ball cricket, right? They are better at red ball cricket because they aren't playing white ball cricket.
Yeah. They concentrate on one thing, right? It's like
amazing. And so I think all those things come about, and Jimmy Anderson not having to worry about other things, and literally just focusing on getting himself fully fit to bowl the next over. Hoggard's era was never going to, I don't think, was probably going to allow him to do that. If he played until he was 40, he might have got to that era. But the early part was they were just getting there. All those things matter, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just lastly, actually, then, because I don't want to keep you too long, Jarrod, thank you for your time, is you talked about sports science and also a little bit about the analytics. And I talked to Benny Howe, who recently played for Birmingham Phoenix in the 100 and Gloucester player as well, and is also, I think, in Abu Dhabi as well with Bangor Tigers. But he, like you, I guess, has got a little bit of an interest in baseball. So he did a season, well, I think he did a summer or a season in Australia, if I'm not mistaken, playing baseball to help with his slower balls and basically delivering. I think he said he's got about 8 different slower balls, which are all different variations, which is really cool. But he said baseball, he found, is a lot more forward thinking in terms of analytics and data. They were kind of eons ahead of cricket. But then when he went to the 100, I talked to him again, and he said that he felt that the 100 had helped push cricket along in terms of the analytics and stats, driven based, I guess, tactics. And that, we see England doing it a lot with Owen Morgan, for example. They've got their signs, etc., and their own statistician or analysis every match. Do you feel that cricket is now starting to trend in the right direction? Do you think it is behind other sports and needs to catch up, or are we now in a position where, given the 100 and other franchises, we're pretty much up to scratch?
Look, baseball was a sport where the information, the pitch-by-pitch information was available. And so when Bill James and the sabermetric community come along in, late 70s, early 80s, they can do all this information, right? They can literally just look it up and work things out. And that still took 20 years to get to Moneyball, right? It's not like these things are instant. So baseball was ahead of all the sports, realistically, just because they worked that out. So, you've had huge movements in basketball. I talked about basketball before, where they shoot, the basketball has changed. The amount of times they throw the ball in the NFL has changed. Where they attempt goals in football has changed, right? All these things are data-driven. Cricket is certainly of that level. I think for Benny, he was playing for Gloucester, not exactly the hotbed of cricket analytics, and he wasn't getting as many contracts in leagues that he should have been playing in beforehand, and I think that's very, very fair. And so I think that there was certainly a case where he probably was seeing the worst of cricket at a certain point, and then he goes to Birmingham Phoenix and he sees what Dan Weston is doing at Birmingham Phoenix and whoever else was working over there at that time, and things did change very quickly. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, look, we're still a long way behind. There's some great baseball stuff that I just want to bring across to cricket. There's some great basketball, baseball, football stuff that I want to bring across to cricket. There's some great cricket-specific stuff that I think we could be doing a lot better. Like the very basic thing that I've said for a long time is one of the reasons that analysis is much better for bowlers than batters is because almost all the footage we have of bowlers is from behind the arm. Right? Now, I can pick a wrong one from behind the arm. Fucked if I can pick a wrong one if I'm facing one. right? Unless they've pitched it short enough that I've seen it spin in. Chances are I'm not picking that thing, right? From behind their arm, I could pick Rashid Khan's wrong, right? Not all the time, some of them. And that's where all our footage is from. And so when I was doing analysis with teams are like, oh, this is great. Thank you. But the batters are like, can you show me this guy from out the front? That's a really simple thing that we just hadn't thought about, right? Which is it's a great angle for the TV cameras, but not a great angle for analysis. So there are really simple things that we can do in cricket, but I think things are moving at a very, very fast rate. I think we're still in a period where a lot of hobbyists are doing it, but I think teams are working it out. I think leagues are working it out. But I will say this: it's funny that Benny said that. When I was first contacted about the 100, I was asked if I wanted to do like a proper stats website for the 100, and it was going to be like the sorts that you see in the basketball and baseball. And then I was told they're going to have 7 analysts per team. And it's going to be the most forward-thinking league in the world. And in the end, I think each team had 2 analysts. I think the women's teams had 1 analyst. I could be wrong. Maybe they had 2 as well, but I'm not sure if they did. So you can go back. Big Bash was like, yeah, what you wait? We're going to get spatial tracking data, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. It's like, and the ICC a couple of years ago, we've got exit velocity, and we've got this, and we've got that. And it's like, yeah, but still. You don't have any actual actionable information to help cricket teams, right? We're getting there, is I suppose what I would say. I think one thing that will really help and is starting to happen is a lot of the companies that work with the baseball teams are working out that cricket's a big market. So I talked to one of them not that long ago and said, I'm working with a cricket team at the moment. They'd like to know how much it would cost for you to give them this piece of equipment. And they said, it won't work for cricket at the moment. Someone else has already asked, but we're developing it. I talked to another company that was selling another bit of equipment, and they were like, yeah, we're ready to ship. We don't know why no one in cricket hasn't bought it yet, but we've already thought that cricket is our next market. Those sorts of things are going to really help. Like we've got the smart bat meters now, and we've got the stickers on the bat and all those sorts of things. But just from a real, normal side of things, once the technology companies are already working with other sports start going, well, wait a minute, this is $1 billion sport over here. Why don't we at least try and sell some stuff to them? I think that would be a big difference.
No, I agree. Thank you for that. That was a really good insight actually as well. Yeah, I agree. I think hopefully cricket is trending in the right direction, as you said. That's all from me. Is there anything you want to touch upon, Jarrod? Thanks for being on.
No, that was great. Thanks for now my headphones are gone.
Sorry.
Don't mind me.
That's all right.
Perfect. No. Thanks for having me on. If you're interested in anything I've said here, as you said before, I've got a YouTube channel, I've got podcasts. I'm on TikTok. I don't know, wherever you want to find. I've got an emailer. I'll be covering what am I covering next? I'm covering New Zealand, India Test Series, and then I'm covering the Ashes. So I've got a big 7 weeks of sleeping at odd hours.
Yeah, I can imagine. And also you've got a couple of green room discussions going on as well, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't see any other people doing that. From what I can see.
It's quite interesting. I did one of the Reddit AMAs early on because the Reddit people kept asking. And I don't think I was the first sort of known cricket person to do it, but I was probably about the first one to do it regularly. Yeah. And a lot of my friends don't feel comfortable with it. I think they're afraid they're going to be asked a question they don't know the answer to, but that happens like all the time. But I got used to doing them through the Reddit AMAs. And then when I started my Patreon, I made it part of my Patreon as well. And then when when Clubhouse first exploded, I was over there early on. I really liked Clubhouse when I first went over. Some of the cricket chats there were really, really good. And I just started doing it there. And for me, it's not particularly hard. I suppose I also did them with when we had our film out. We traveled the country and I did Q&As, and so I'm quite used to it. But I really enjoy it. I think it worked. It's a bit like a lot of things. If you do it on Twitter Spaces, too many people come in, and every second question is about Virat Kohli, or Bubba, or Steve Smith, or Kane Williamson. Actually, probably now more than Smith. But when you when you have a small sort of devoted audience, they kind of know the questions that you're going to give good answers to. It's almost like you train the audience. And, Spotify Green Room, I probably only have a couple of hundred followers, but they know the sort of questions that I'm going to answer quite well.
Yeah.
And so it ends up being a really good chat. Look, I just really enjoy doing it. And then we make it into a podcast. We weren't sure if it would work as a podcast because it's just me. Well, it's me and the people asking questions. But I just said to my producer, let's just try it. And it's been incredibly popular. People just absolutely love it. So, really happy to be able to do it. And people just like being able to chat to someone about cricket. A lot of the questions we get are from people who don't live in cricket countries, right?
Exactly.
So on Patreon yesterday, the other day, I had a chat with a woman who grew up in South Africa and Italy. And she now lives in Canada. She's a massive cricket fan, cricket player. She's like, I don't have anyone to talk to about this sort of stuff, and so you do get those sorts of people. And there's a real growing European to a certain extent, but really an American and Canadian audience of people who are non-traditional cricket people. So, they're not like you and me and they move to another country and, they're not ethnically Indian or Australian or they don't have an Australian dad or an uncle or whatever. Do you know what I mean? We're talking about people who just like sport. Somehow they found out about cricket and next thing you know, they're, they're on my Q&A asking questions, and there's quite a few of them in my Patreon actually who like to ask questions privately. Wright Thompson, the famous ESPN writer, he's like that. Occasionally he'll just send me a really, really basic cricket question because he just needs his knowledge to get to that next level so he can understand why this is a thing.
No, I think it's a great concept. So, guys, do check it out. And I'll put all your social media links and YouTube.
Just put my link tree in. Otherwise, you'll be linking for 8 hours.
I might do that. Yeah, I might do that. But thank you, Jarrod, for being on. I really appreciate it. It's fantastic to have your expert analysis and opinion on this. It's been a great chat. So thank you for taking time out of your day. Guys, do please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, as I said, I will put Jarrod's link tree in the description. Do go over to his YouTube as well. I really enjoy it, and do check it out, subscribe, like the videos, all that good stuff. And he's got a Patreon as well, which sounds like he's got some cool perks. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well, and I'll see you on the next video.